Court hearings were scheduled as usual that day, the docket packed tight with cases stretching well into the late afternoon. The courthouse buzzed with restless energy, its long, dimly lit hallway crowded with people awaiting their fates. Some slumped on worn benches, clutching divorce papers or property deeds, while others paced nervously, whispering about inheritances they'd fight tooth and nail to claim. The air carried a mix of cheap cologne, sweat, and the faint tang of desperation. As the old saying goes, everyone has their own troubles, and this place was a melting pot of them. "Rise, the court is now in session. Silence in the room." The bailiff's voice boomed, cutting through the low hum of murmurs. Inside the courtroom, a faint scent of polished wood mingled with the stale bitterness of coffee left too long in a pot somewhere down the hall. A sterile hush settled over the space as the trial for the Carter family's divorce and property division kicked off. Emily Carter sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her posture rigid as if she could brace herself against what was coming. Her palms were slick with sweat, slipping slightly against the scratched oak surface in front of her. Every so often her stomach twisted into knots, a sour churn that made her press a hand discreetly to her side. She stole a glance at her public defender, a wiry, frazzled man named Paul Hensley, whose ill-fitting suit strained at the shoulders. He had a nervous tic, a twitch in his left eye, and he shuffled through a messy stack of papers with the frantic energy of someone who'd barely skimmed them over breakfast. She'd met him just twice before today, and both times he'd smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and apology. Emily knew he was no match for the man sitting across the room. Nathan's attorney, James Randall, oozed confidence. He lounged in his chair like it was a leather recliner instead of courtroom furniture, his tailored three-piece suit catching the light just so. Charcoal grey, pinstriped, probably worth more than Emily's entire wardrobe. His silver cufflinks glinted as he tapped a pen lazily against his legal pad. A predator at rest. She'd heard Nathan brag about him once. "Best money can buy, Em?" Guy's a shark. And there he was, poised to tear her apart. Emily's gaze shifted as Nathan took the stand, his broad shoulders filling out a navy blazer she'd ironed for him a lifetime ago. He adjusted his tie, a silk one she'd bought him for their 3rd anniversary, then flashed a thin, practiced smile at the judge. When he spoke, his voice was smooth as polished glass, each word laced with a subtle venom that only she'd recognize after years of hearing it behind closed doors. "Your Honor," Nathan began, leaning slightly into the microphone, his tone measured but carrying just enough charm to sell it. "I'm a practical man. Always have been. I've built a solid career, 6 figures, full benefits, 401k, the whole deal. This apartment we're fighting over? I bought it outright. Cash on the barrel. Deeds in my name, titles clean as a whistle. You can check the records if you want. It's all there, black and white. When I met Emily, she was, well, let's just call it what it was. She was a mess. Living with her mom in some crumbling duplex on the east side, the kind of place where the paint peels and the roof leaks every spring. She was scraping by on tips from waitressing at that greasy little diner off 12th Street. Mel's, I think it's called. You know the one? With the neon sign flickering half the time and the coffee that tastes like motor oil? That was her life. Not a dime to her name, just a beat-up Toyota with a busted taillight and a couple of credit cards maxed out on clearance rack clothes and takeout. You might wonder why I even bothered marrying her. He paused, letting out a dry, humorless chuckle that echoed faintly in the quiet room. His eyes flicked toward her for a split second, just long enough to twist the knife, before sliding back to the judge. Pity, I suppose. I thought, hey, she's got a sweet face, decent smile. Maybe she'll figure out how to keep a house together, pop out a kid or two down the line. But nah, that was wishful thinking on my part. Big mistake. He shifted in his seat, crossing one leg over the other with the ease of a man settling into a bar stool for a casual chat. I've been the one holding it all together, Your Honor. She pulls in, what, $10 an hour, maybe? Barely enough to cover her gas money driving that rust bucket around. Meanwhile, I'm the one stuck choking down her burnt scrambled eggs. if you can even call them that, more like rubber with a side of regret, or thawing out another sad little TV dinner because she can't be bothered to cook anything worth eating. The apartment's a damn disaster unless I roll up my sleeves and clean it myself. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry spilling out of the hamper, dust so thick you could write your name in it. No kids either, not a single damn thing to show for putting up with her all these years. And the renovations? Granite countertops in the kitchen, new hardwood floors that took me 3 weekends to sand and stain myself, that fancy sectional in the living room that she whined about until I caved and bought it. All my money. My sweat. She didn't lift a finger or pitch in a penny. So yeah, I think it's pretty damn clear the apartment's mine. Frankly, she ought to be thanking me. She's been living rent-free off my dime since the day we said, I do. Better than she ever had it crashing on her mum's lumpy couch. Emily's throat tightened until it felt like a fist was squeezing it shut. Her chest heaved with shallow, uneven breaths as she fought to keep the tears from spilling down her cheeks. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, almost buzzing with the weight of Nathan's words. Every syllable hit her like a hammer striking a nail, driving deeper into old wounds she'd tried to bury. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles blanched white, the rough grain of the wood biting into her skin. She couldn't hold it in anymore. "That's not true!" she burst out, her voice cracking like a snapped twig, raw and desperate as it sliced through the courtroom's stillness. "He's lying, Your Honor. He's lying about all of it. I worked, I cooked, I tried. He's twisting everything." The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack, a sound that jolted through her like a gunshot. She flinched, her shoulders hunching instinctively. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said, his voice flat but edged with authority, peering over his wire-rimmed glasses. "You'll have your turn to speak. Control yourself, or I'll have you removed." She sank back into her chair, the cheap cushion creaking under her weight. Her face burned, a flush creeping up her neck as the sting of Nathan's words lingered in her ears like a bad song on repeat. Across the room he smirked, just a flicker of a smile, there and gone in an instant, but she caught it. Emily's public defender, Paul Hensley, leaned over and mumbled something under his breath, a garbled string of words about precedent and insufficient documentation that sounded more like a plea for mercy than a defense. His voice was so weak, so unconvincing, that it barely carried past the edge of their table. Emily's heart sank as she watched him fumble with his notes, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple despite the courtroom's chilly air. She realized then, with a cold, sinking certainty, that it was over. She'd lost the case before the gavel even fell. Her evidence was a flimsy stack of crumpled receipts, a few old bank statements, and a handwritten list of chores she'd kept up with over the years, pathetic scraps next to the polished, airtight arguments Nathan's lawyer had rolled out like a red carpet. Of course, Nathan could afford that kind of firepower. With his 6-figure salary and cushy corporate job, he'd hired James Randall, a top-tier attorney who oozed competence and knew every legal loophole like the back of his manicured hand. Randall had presented Nathan's case with the finesse of a seasoned actor, every gesture and pause rehearsed to perfection. Emily's feeble protests, her shaky interruptions and half-formed rebuttals, only drew stifled chuckles from the courtroom, and it wasn't by chance. On Randall's advice, Nathan had invited a handful of buddies, guys from his golf league and a couple of co-workers, carefully coached to snicker and whisper at just the right moments. They sat in the back row, arms crossed, smirking like they were in on some private joke. "She's delusional," one muttered loud enough to carry. "Thinks she's owed something," another hissed. It was subtle but devastating, a backdrop that painted Emily as desperate, grasping, her claims laughable to anyone listening. When it was finally her turn to speak, Emily stood on unsteady legs, her knees trembling beneath the faded skirt she'd ironed the night before. The words she'd rehearsed in her bathroom mirror for weeks, about the late nights she'd spent balancing their checkbook, the meals she'd cooked even when he complained, the way she'd scrubbed that apartment top to bottom, tangled in her throat. Overwhelmed by the sea of eyes boring into her, she faltered, her voice barely above a whisper. I did try, Your Honor. I worked hard. It wasn't like he said—" She trailed off, her hands twisting together as the judge's impassive stare bore down on her. Then Randall pounced. He steamrolled her with the ease of a man who'd done this 100 times, his voice booming with authority as he called up a witness, a family friend and Nathan's co-worker named Greg Tillman. Greg swaggered to the stand, a stocky guy with a ruddy face and a too-tight collared shirt, flashing Nathan a quick nod like they'd just shared a beer at the bar. "I've known the Carters for years," Greg said, leaning into the microphone with a casual drawl. "Been over to their place plenty of times, Thanksgiving, poker nights, you name it, and I can tell you straight up, Emily's no homemaker. Place was always a mess unless Nathan took charge. Everything rested on him, family finances, household chores, the works. Guy's a saint for putting up with it as long as he did. Who'd want to bust their ass at a stressful job all day just to come home and start cooking dinner? And that apartment? Nathan even borrowed a couple grand from me, just as a friend, to help cover the down payment when they bought it. Emily didn't contribute a cent, nada. She just coasted. The judge's ruling came down like a guillotine. Nathan got the apartment, lock, stock, and granite countertops. The divorce was finalized in a single curt sentence. Emily sat there, devastated, the weight of it crushing her chest until she could hardly breathe. The courtroom buzzed with quiet judgment as people filed out, whispers about what a slob she must be, how she couldn't even cook for her husband, how she'd let the house fall apart. She caught snippets as they passed. No wonder he left her, and some women just don't get it. She wanted to bolt, to find some dark corner and cry until her heart stopped aching, but her legs felt like lead. As she gathered her things, Nathan brushed past her in the hallway, his cologne, the same woody scent he'd worn since their dating days, hitting her like a punch to the gut. He stopped just long enough to sneer, his voice low and dripping with contempt. "Got what you wanted, huh? Thought I was bluffing all this time? Go grab your leftover junk from the spare room, leave your keys on the counter, and goodbye forever. Better head back to your mom's little nowhere town. And the sooner the better. Maybe they'll take you in out of pity." His words cut deeper than anything in the courtroom. Emily's vision blurred with tears, her breath hitching as she choked back a sob. She couldn't believe this was the same man who'd once brought her daisies from the corner store, who'd called her Em or sweetheart in that soft voice she'd fallen for. "Nathan," she said, her voice trembling, pleading, "is there nothing human left in you? Things were fine between us not that long ago. All those years together. Does this new girlfriend really mean so much that you'd grind me into the dirt like this? Aren't you ashamed? Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you to deserve this?" For a split second, Nathan's mask slipped. She saw it, a flicker of something in his eyes, maybe guilt, maybe a memory of the man he used to be, but he buried it fast, hardening his features into that cynical smirk she'd come to dread. "I asked you nicely to give up the apartment, Em," he snapped, his tone sharp enough to slice. "We could have split quietly, no mess, no fuss. But you wouldn't do it the easy way, so this is on you. And she's not just some girl, she's my boss's daughter, okay? Do you even get what that means for me? My career's about to skyrocket. Her dad's got connections, and once we're married, he'll set me up sweet. Maybe she'll even give me a kid. Something you couldn't manage. You're dull, Emily. Boring as hell. Life with you was like watching paint dry, and I'm done with it." He turned on his heel and strode off, his polished loafers clicking against the tile, smug as ever in his victory. Emily stood rooted to the spot, sobs breaking free now, ragged and unstoppable. She was shattered, emotionally gutted, defeated in a way that left her hollow. People brushed past her in the hallway, some casting pitying glances, others ignoring her entirely, but she barely noticed. Her life had cleaved clean in two, before this nightmare and after. Paul Hensley shuffled up beside her, adjusting his crooked tie and muttering something about appealing the decision. "There's still time, you know," he said, his voice nasal and uncertain. "We could file something, maybe dig up more evidence. I mean, Uh, it's not over, right? He scratched the back of his neck, clearly eager to be done with her and his modest fee. But Emily didn't believe a word of it. She shook her head faintly, staring at the floor as tears dripped onto her scuffed shoes. Nothing could change this. Not now. Her life, everything she'd built, everything she'd been, was gone. Before had been a brighter chapter, a stretch of happier days when life seemed to hum along smoothly. Back then, Emily and Nathan had clicked despite their mismatched roots. She came from a modest family, her dad a mechanic, her mom a part-time cashier at the local grocery, their house a squat little ranch with peeling siding and a patchy lawn. Nathan, though, grew up in a cushier world. His folks owned a sprawling colonial with a wraparound porch, his dad a mid-level exec at an insurance firm, his mom a homemaker with a knack for gardening. His job as a project manager paid handsomely, a stark contrast to Emily's gig as a school aide, where she earned just enough to cover gas and the occasional coffee splurge. Right after their wedding, a small affair at a community centre with folding chairs and a potluck spread, they'd moved into their own place, a cosy 2-bedroom apartment downtown. Nathan's mom, Linda, popped by often, toting casseroles or clippings from her rose bushes. She took to Emily right away, charmed by her quiet warmth and the way she'd fuss over the smallest kindness. Linda didn't see any glaring flaws. Sure, she'd raise an eyebrow now and then about the lack of grandkids, but she'd wave it off with a shrug. Some things take time, she'd say, knowing Emily had health troubles that made conceiving a long shot. Nathan wasn't always so forgiving. His frustration would slip out in little jabs, sharp enough to sting but veiled as offhand remarks. "You're at that school all day, surrounded by kids," he'd mutter over dinner, poking at a plate of her chicken casserole. "And yet we're still empty-handed." Emily would force a laugh, her fork trembling slightly as she speared a carrot, but inside, it gnawed at her. Couldn't he see she didn't choose this? She'd been trying, swallowing pills that left her nauseous, bloated and 20 pounds heavier, trudging to doctor's appointments where they'd murmur about low odds and patience. The meds turned her stomach and dulled her energy, but she kept at it, hoping for a miracle that never came. Each negative test deepened the quiet sorrow she carried, a weight she hid behind tight smiles and extra shifts at work. Now, in the after, life stretched out bleak and grey, a monochrome wasteland where her dreams of a happy marriage lay in ruins. Nathan was the sole architect of that destruction, the one who'd torched it all and walked away smirking. Funny thing was, he hadn't always meant to be so ruthless. Circumstances, those sneaky twisting currents of life, had nudged him down this jagged path step by step. Once upon a time, Nathan had been head over heels for Emily. He'd spotted her on a crowded city bus, a charming blonde with a shy smile, her nose buried in a paperback, a strand of hair slipping from her ponytail. She'd missed her stop fussing with her bag, and he'd leapt off at the next one, chasing her down 2 blocks just to say hi. Breathless, grinning like an idiot, he'd introduced himself. "I'm Nathan. Sorry. I couldn't let you get away without at least trying." Her simplicity hooked him, her soft laugh, the way her eyes lit up at every little thing. She never demanded much, practically glowing when he'd show up with a dollar store trinket or a wilted bouquet from a street vendor. His mum adored her too, nodding approvingly over tea one afternoon. "She's not spoiled, Nathan," Linda had said, patting his arm. "She'll make a good wife. Appreciates what we've got, doesn't expect the moon." So he'd proposed. Why not? They were in their mid-20s. All his buddies were settling down, some with toddlers already tearing through their houses. Nathan figured he'd join the club. At first, it worked. Emily listened when he vented about work, adapted to his quirks, tried hard to please him. She'd whip up meals that filled the apartment with warm, savoury smells, roast chicken with crispy skin, mashed potatoes flecked with chives, apple pies she'd fuss over until the crust was just right. The place stayed spotless too, floors gleaming, throw pillows fluffed. But over time, that shine dulled for Nathan. The routine grew stale, then grating. And Emily? She'd put on weight from those fertility meds. her once petite frame softening into curves he didn't recognize. She wasn't the waifish girl he'd chased down the street anymore, and he couldn't, or wouldn't, hide his irritation. He started craving a spark, something fresh to jolt him out of the monotony. It found him at a work party he'd gone to solo. Emily had begged off with a headache, and he hadn't pushed. There, across a room buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses, he met Irene. She was lively, carefree, all sharp wit and bold lipstick, her dark hair tumbling over one shoulder as she tossed barbs at him over a martini. Their banter turned into late-night drinks, then stolen weekends, then a full-blown affair. Nathan didn't plan to ditch Emily, not at first. He liked the setup, calm stability at home with her, thrilling passion with Irene on the side. Irene didn't mind either. Early on, it was just a game to her, too. A fling with no strings. Nathan knew she was his boss's daughter, Elliot Grayson, a hulking man with a corner office and a temper. But Elliot stayed in the dark until some loose-lipped co-worker ratted them out. When the boss caught wind, he erupted. He summoned Nathan to his office one rainy afternoon, the door slamming shut behind them with a thud that rattled the framed awards on the wall. Elliot loomed over his desk, his voice a low growl. "Listen up, Carter, I won't say this twice. You've got a choice to make, right now, your wife or my daughter. I strongly suggest Irene. Pick Emily, and you're out of here today. No severance, no references. I pay you damn well. Good luck finding that kind of gig again. And trust me, I'll make sure no one touches you. I've got friends everywhere. You'll be sweeping streets or flipping burgers if you're lucky. I won't let you disgrace my family cheating on your wife and screwing around with my girl. Decide." The ultimatum hit like a freight train. What choice did Nathan have? He went all in on Irene, especially since she'd warmed to the idea of marrying him after her dad's blessing. What's to regret, he told himself, pacing his office late one night. Emily's from some podunk town, dirt poor. Sure, she's pretty, or was. I was young and stupid when I married her, didn't think it through. Mom liked her, fine, but that's not enough. This question mark, this is a golden ticket. Irene's connected, her dad's loaded. I'd be an idiot to pass this up. He didn't spare a thought for the wreckage he'd leave behind, the pain he'd carve into Emily's life. His focus narrowed to keeping Elliot happy, and maybe snagging a promotion as a perk for tying the knot with Irene. Nathan was a jerk, plain and simple, no sugarcoating it. Emily's world tilted off its axis the night Nathan came home late, his tie loosened and his shirt rumpled, with a dolled-up woman trailing behind him. She was all curves and confidence, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor Emily had polished 100 times. Irene, his mistress bold as brass, stood there in a tight red dress that screamed money, her glossy lips curling as Nathan wrapped an arm around her waist and hugged her right in front of Emily, like it was nothing. His voice was flat, almost bored, as he dropped the bomb. "This is Irene, the woman I love. I'm done with you, Emily. I'm filing for divorce, and we're splitting the apartment. Yep, you heard me right. I'm confident it'll stay mine. No hysterics, please. Just life. Pack your stuff and get out. Now." Emily stood frozen, her mouth dry, words lodged somewhere deep in her chest. Irene strutted around the living room like she already owned it, her manicured fingers brushing over the furniture. She snatched up their framed wedding photo from the mantel, a snapshot of a younger, beaming Emily in a simple white dress, Nathan grinning beside her, and smirked at it like it was a thrift store find. These walls could use a fresh coat of paint, maybe a bold teal or something chic. And the bedroom layout? Total disaster. We'll gut it, rearrange everything. But that view? She sashayed to the window, peering out at the park and the river glinting under the streetlights. Park and river right there. Gorgeous. Oh, honey, don't forget to change the locks once she's gone. We don't need strangers waltzing into our little love nest, do we? Irene shot Emily a smug, sidelong glance, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Nathan fawned over her, nodding like a puppy eager to please. "You're right, babe. Teal would pop. And yeah, locks are first on the list." They acted like Emily was a ghost, already erased from the scene, She hadn't even managed to stammer a response, but they didn't care. They'd decided her fate without a second thought, rewriting her life in a matter of minutes. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she stumbled to the bedroom, grabbing a duffel bag from the closet. She shoved in clothes, jeans, sweaters, a frayed nightgown, her hands shaking so badly she dropped a sock and left it crumpled on the floor. She had no choice. That night she crashed in a cheap hostel downtown, the kind of place with stained carpets and a flickering neon sign out front. The room smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke, and she lay on a lumpy mattress, clutching her phone, passport, and wallet under her pillow to keep them safe from the rough crowd muttering in the halls. Like it or not, she couldn't stay under the same roof as Nathan and Irene. She had to find somewhere, anywhere, fast. The next evening, bone-tired from scouring rental listings on her phone, she lucked into a tiny guest house on the city outskirts. A school friend, Jen, had texted her about it. Landlady's chill. Inherited it from her aunt. Won't gouge you. Emily met the woman, an older, no-nonsense type with a smoker's rasp, who barely glanced at her ID before handing over the keys. Rent's due first of the month. Keep it clean. It wasn't the apartment. No granite counters, no river view, just a bare-bones box with a sagging couch, a hot plate, and a twin bed shoved against a cracked window. But what could she do? Her budget was a threadbare string, and she'd scrambled to grab it. Moving her few belongings was a quick, sad affair. Some clothes, a box of books, a chipped mug she'd always liked. She hadn't accumulated much in the marriage, and now she saw why. Nathan had always kept the good stuff his. Emily tried to steel herself for court, scribbling notes on napkins and gathering flimsy arguments to prove she deserved half the apartment. She dug up old utility bills she'd paid, a lease agreement with her name scribbled next to his, anything to show she'd been part of it. But what could she really offer against Nathan's slick evidence and high-priced lawyer? She pinned her hopes on Paul Hensley, her public defender, praying he knew the legal ropes well enough to fight for her. Deep down, though, doubt gnawed at her. Her school nurse salary, barely above minimum wage, couldn't stretch to a decent attorney. Paul had skimmed her documents in their first meeting, his tie stained with what looked like mustard, and given her a skeptical shrug. "We've got a shot, I guess," he'd muttered, scratching his stubbly chin. "I'll fight for your rights. Don't worry." But his promises felt as thin as the paper they were written on. And now the grim reality. No husband. No home. Emily couldn't wrap her head around how fast it had all unravelled, how the life she'd clung to had slipped through her fingers like sand. Worn out from the day, she trudged back to the guest house as dusk settled over the outskirts, the walk from the bus stop stretching longer than it should have. Her sneakers scuffed the gravel path, and she fumbled for her keys in the dim light, her breath fogging in the chilly air. That's when she noticed it, a crisp white paper peeking out from under the door, its edge fluttering slightly in the draft. "What's this?" she murmured, exhaustion slurring her words. "A utility bill? But the landlady said those go straight to her. She'd just tell me what to chip in for electricity, water, heat." Curious, she bent down and plucked it up, her fingers brushing the cold concrete. It was too dark to read outside, the street lamp's weak glow barely reaching her porch. She shuffled inside, flipped on the single bulb dangling from the ceiling and squinted at the scrawl. "Emily Johnson, what you're about to read is serious. Big troubles brewing at school. Someone's digging dirt on you, trying to get you fired. Be careful." Her stomach dropped. Who'd left this? Hardly anyone at school knew she'd moved here. Jen, maybe, but she wouldn't pull something this cryptic. Puzzling over the mysterious warning, Emily tossed her bag onto the couch and tidied up on autopilot, wiping down the hot plate, stacking her books on a wobbly shelf. She forced down a slice of stale bread with peanut butter, her appetite gone, then crawled into bed. Work loomed tomorrow. She couldn't skip it, note or no note. She tried to dismiss it as a prank. Her job wasn't the kind anyone schemed over. She wasn't a doctor or a judge, just a school nurse handing out band-aids, checking temps, giving vaccines. What dirt could there be? But the next morning, As soon as she stepped into her cramped office at Lincoln Elementary, still smelling of antiseptic and crayons, the principal's voice crackled over the intercom. "Emily Johnson to my office now." Gerald Thompson was an arrogant man, a petty tyrant with thinning hair and a permanent sneer, who treated staff like pawns in his little kingdom. He dismissed their opinions, hoarded power like a dragon with gold, and had a knack for twisting lies into truth. The staff despised him. Some had lodged complaints with the district about his harsh tactics and ethical lapses, but most just bowed their heads or grovelled to stay on his good side. Emily trudged to his office, her stomach knotting. He sat behind his desk, tapping a pen against a stack of papers, and fixed her with a cold stare. "Your office is getting inspected today. We're checking for expired medications. Thought you should know." The note flashed in her mind, sharp and sudden. So that's what it meant, she thought. But who wrote it? How'd they know? She wasn't too worried. Her office was her sanctuary, medications neatly labelled in locked cabinets, records pristine, vaccines on schedule. She'd always been meticulous, a habit drilled into her at nursing school where she'd graduated with honours. Landing this job had been a breeze. She loved the kids, their gap-toothed smiles and endless questions. Still, a flicker of unease crept in as she nodded and left his office. Could Thompson be plotting something? She walked slowly down the hall, her sneakers squeaking on the waxed floor. She passed Steve, the janitor, hunched over a loose railing with a screwdriver. He straightened up as she approached, his weathered face tightening as their eyes met. He looked like he wanted to speak. His mouth twitched, but he hesitated, then turned back to his work. He's acting odd, Emily thought, her pulse quickening. Like he knows something. She shook it off, checked the kitchen and cafeteria as usual, approving the day's menu of chicken nuggets and carrot sticks, then returned to her office. Moments later, Thompson barged in, an inspection team trailing him like a pack of hounds. Two stern-faced women in district polos, clipboards in hand, didn't just check the drugs. They combed through everything, drawers, files, even the trash can under her desk. The office was fine, spotless as always. But the medications? A disaster. Expired bottles of cough syrup, epinephrine pens past their date, even a few drugs like sedatives, not allowed in a school setting. Oh my God, Emily's heart raced, her palms clammy as she stared at the mess spilling from her cabinet. Who set me up? Why? The only other key is with Thompson. Did he do this? She'd checked everything last week. It had been perfect. Thompson stood calmly amid the inspectors, arms crossed, his expression a mask of fake regret. "I'm sorry I didn't catch this sooner," he said, shaking his head. "I trusted her too much, clearly a mistake." He turned to Emily, his voice dripping with mock disappointment. "How could you let us down like this, Emily? I never thought you'd be so careless. You know this kind of negligence isn't tolerable in a school, with kids involved. Were you treating them with expired drugs? Putting them at risk?" She wanted the floor to crack open and swallow her whole to escape the weight of those accusations. They scolded her like a child caught stealing cookies, their voices sharp and condescending, all for something she hadn't done. She stood silent, sensing her protests would bounce off their smug certainty. This was a setup, plain as day. It hurt, a deep aching sting, and tears welled up, but she clenched her fists and held them back with raw willpower. Her throat tightened until she couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe right. The inspector's verdict snapped her back to reality. "Mr. Thompson, call a staff meeting and address this," one said, scribbling on her clipboard. "This can't be ignored. It's about the kids' health and safety. No joking matter. And you, Emily, start job hunting. Be more careful next time. You're getting off easy. Could have been worse." The inspectors filed out, their clipboards tucked under their arms, leaving Emily alone in her office. She stood frozen, crushed beneath the weight of lies and betrayal that had just unravelled her life. "How can they ruin someone so easily?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air vent. For what? Her head throbbed with a dull, insistent ache. Her heart sank into a pit of despair, and tears stung her eyes, blurring the familiar outlines of her desk and cabinets. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed into her chair, the worn cushion creaking under her weight. Sobs broke free, raw, choking gasps that echoed in the small room. She might have stayed there forever, drowning in her misery, if a senior student hadn't burst in, breathless and wide-eyed. "Ms. Johnson, they need you in the teacher's lounge. Quick!" What now? Emily thought, a fresh wave of dread washing over her. Another humiliation to finish me off? She dragged herself to the sink in the corner, splashing cold water on her face until the sting numbed her cheeks. Her reflection in the chipped mirror showed puffy eyes and splotchy skin, but she didn't care. She trudged to the lounge like a prisoner heading to the gallows, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum with every reluctant step. Inside, the teachers sat clustered at round tables, sipping coffee from styrofoam cups, their low chatter halting as she entered. "Why are they here?" she wondered, scanning the room. Principal Thompson stood at the front, adjusting his tie with a smug little tug, and launched into the staff meeting agenda. Budget updates, upcoming events, nothing out of the ordinary. Emily's brow furrowed. She was a nurse, not a teacher. Why drag her into this? Then it clicked, sharp and bitter. This was his signature move, bending rules to tighten the noose, building a public case for her firing to shame and punish her. It stung like a slap. She loved her job, pouring her heart into every scraped knee and fevered forehead. She'd always done it well, hadn't she? Why'd he fire me? Why frame me? She thought, her nails digging into her palms. It's disgusting, twisting everything I've worked for into this lie. Later, as she shuffled out into the schoolyard to clear her head, she spotted Steve raking leaves near the playground. She liked him. His open, kind eyes crinkled at the corners, and his weathered face carried a warmth that put her at ease. He'd started a few months back, replacing old Mr. Hargrove, who'd retired with a bad hip. People whispered about Steve sometimes. Why would a young, fit guy in his 30s take a low-paying janitor gig? The story trickled out eventually. He'd been a taxi driver until a drunk sped through a red light and smashed into him 2 years ago. The crash left him with a complex leg fracture, a mess of shattered bone that surgeons pieced together with a titanium plate. It held for a while, but now it was causing trouble. Pain flared up when he stood too long, and he limped noticeably by midday. The doctors said the plate was sparking a cyst. It needed to come out soon, or his body would reject it entirely. Corrective surgery and rehab would cost a fortune. Thousands he didn't have, especially since the other driver's insurance dodged every claim. Driving all day was agony now. His knee screamed after an hour, so the doctors told him to stick to light activity to keep the joint from seizing up. This job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, letting him alternate between sweeping floors and resting in the break room, a gentle rhythm that kept him going. Drained by her troubles and the fresh wound of losing her job, Emily shuffled back to the guest house as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. She couldn't call it home. It was just a roof, a borrowed space that smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. Turning a corner near the bus stop, she glimpsed a figure trailing her, a limping man in a faded jacket. Her pulse quickened. She stopped, spun around, and marched toward him, her fear hardening into defiance. "Why are you tailing me, Steve?" she asked, half joking to mask the knot in her stomach. What if he grabbed her? He seemed decent, but after today, who could she trust? "No worries, Emily, relax," Steve said, raising his hands with a sheepish grin. "I didn't approach you at school because I didn't want anyone seeing us. You've been there. It's a snake pit. They'd eat each other alive for a scrap of gossip, and the principal's the worst of the lot, but that's not why I'm here." "Wait," she interrupted, her voice sharp as the pieces clicked. "Explain this clearly. I'm lost after that damn meeting." "Oh, I get it. You wrote that note, didn't you? How do you even know where I live?" "Simple," he said, leaning against a lamppost to ease his leg. "No big secret. Everyone at school's been buzzing about your divorce. Word travels fast in a place like that. And your friend, Jen, she's the one who tipped you off about this place, right? She mentioned it to a few folks." Anyway, the day before that inspection, I was fixing a cabinet in the 5th grade classroom, door cracked open, just minding my own business. I overheard Thompson in the hall talking low with some guy I didn't recognize. Wouldn't have cared, but then the guy said your name. My boss should have called you, he told Thompson, about Emily, the nurse. The principal perked up, all ears, asking what he needed. The guy didn't blink, said flat out, fire her and make it messy so she remembers. I peeked through the gap, saw him slip Thompson an envelope, thick, like it was stuffed with cash. Thompson pocketed it quick as a flash and said, "Don't worry, she's gone tomorrow." Could Nathan have done this to me? Emily gasped, her voice breaking as the realization hit. Divorce wasn't enough. He took my home, and now my job too. What kind of monster? Seeing her deflate, Steve rushed on, his tone urgent. That's done now. No point dwelling on it. I caught up with you for something else. You'll need a new job, right? I saw a posting nearby. Someone's looking for a nanny for a little girl. Want to call? I know what it's like to be broke, scraping by, wondering how you'll eat next week. He pointed to a weathered ad taped to a lamppost a few steps away. Sitter with medical training wanted. Urgent. Emily fumbled for her phone and dialed right there, her hands trembling but hopeful. A man with a pleasant, steady voice answered, introducing himself as Victor. He explained he had a 6-year-old daughter, Lily, who'd been under the weather lately. Nothing serious, just enough to need an experienced nurse. When Emily mentioned her school job, his tone brightened. Perfect. Can you come by tomorrow morning? I've got a business trip. Need you here on time. Say 8 a.m. sharp. I'll text you the address. Steve watched her face soften, a small smile breaking through as she hung up. Phew, they took me, she said, exhaling a shaky laugh. Temporary, but better than nothing. I can pay my bills. Thanks, Steve. Why are we standing out here in the cold? Come in. I'll make dinner, brew some tea. Nothing fancy. I live pretty simple, but you're welcome to what I've got. Steve's eyes lit up at the invite, a grin tugging at his lips. Don't have to ask me twice. They stepped into the guest house and she set to work, boiling water on the hot plate, slicing bread, digging out a jar of jam from her meager stash. They lingered over tea, the steam curling up between them as they traded stories. Emily spilled it all, losing the apartment, Nathan's betrayal, the way he'd paraded Irene around like a trophy. Steve listened, nodding, then opened up too. I get it. My girlfriend bailed after the crash, didn't want the baggage. Found some richer guy with a flashy car and no limp. Stung like hell. I did so much for her. Helped her folks build a cottage out in the sticks, hauled lumber in the rain, always tried to keep her happy. That's the thanks I got. Now I don't bother looking. Who'd want a janitor with a paycheck that barely covers rent? I live alone, trying to save for that surgery, but it's a pipe dream. Every dime gets eaten up. They parted with a warm handshake, agreeing to be friends. It mattered, having someone to lean on, someone who'd get it without judging her for the mess her life had become. The next morning, Emily arrived bang on time at a grand house near downtown, its brick facade glowing in the early light. A man in a sharp suit greeted her at the door, a sleek black car idling in the drive with a bored-looking driver tapping the wheel. I'm Victor, he said, shaking her hand firmly. He led her inside, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood as he explained. My daughter's Lily. She's 6. Her mum passed a year ago. Car accident. I remarried. My wife's Zoe. Things are complicated. He lowered his voice, a touch awkward. Lily and Zoe don't get along. She's been listless lately. Hardly eats. No energy. I'm swamped with work. Home late most nights. She misses a mother's touch, you know. I'd feel better if you played with her, took her outside, followed the doctor's orders, little things to bring her back to herself. The pay was triple her school salary, plus free meals, a lifeline she couldn't have dreamed up. Victor clearly adored Lily, sparing no expense to see her smile again. They stepped into her room, a soft space with pastel walls and a mountain of stuffed animals. A pale little figure lay under a quilt, her dark hair fanned across the pillow, eyeing them warily as they entered. How are you, sweetie? Victor asked, his voice gentle as he knelt by her bed. Hungry at all? This is Emily. She'll be with you now. I think you'll be pals. Sorry, kiddo, I've got to run. Big meeting. He kissed her forehead, and Lily clung to his sleeve for a moment before he pried himself free and hurried out. Emily sat beside her, taking her small hand with a reassuring squeeze. She checked her pulse, steady enough, if a bit slow. A bright yellow plush duck perched on the nightstand caught her eye. Your favourite, I bet? She asked, nodding at it. Yeah, Lily whispered, her voice faint but warming. I sleep with it. But Aunt Zoe, my new mom, she laughs, says I'm too old for toys. What's wrong with that? Emily grinned, leaning in like they were sharing a secret. I had a bunny as a kid, grey, floppy ears. Took it to school once, hid it in my backpack so the teacher wouldn't see. Got me through some rough days. Lily's eyes sparked, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. They chatted, and she opened up about her little world, liking strawberry ice cream, hating math, missing the swings at the park. Emily had a knack with kids, a rare ease that drew them out like flowers to sunlight. She coaxed Lily out of bed, helped her wash up with a damp cloth, and even got her to nibble some toast. The housekeeper, a stout woman named Marta, who doubled as cook, was floored when they shuffled into the kitchen asking for tea and a roll with chocolate spread. Good job, Lily. Eating like you should, Marta praised, her hands on her hips. You're all skin and bones, love. Need some meat on you. They didn't notice a tall woman sweep in, yawning wide in a flashy silk robe that shimmered under the lights. Zoe ignored everyone at first, barking at Marta. Coffee black, no sugar and make it quick. Only then did she spot Lily sipping tea at the table, Emily beside her. Under Zoe's sharp gaze, Lily shrank, mumbling a timid, "Good morning." "Morning, sure," Zoe snapped, her tone cutting. "So you're eating now?" "About time. Always playing sick, whining, nothing pleases you." She flicked her eyes to Emily, sizing her up. "You're the one Victor hired. Fine, try getting her on her feet. I'll be watching. Don't think it'll be a cakewalk. And check her meals with me. Pastries aren't breakfast. They just make you fat." Emily saw it instantly. She and Zoe wouldn't click. No point fixating on that, she told herself. My job's making Lily happy. That's what counts. And it worked. She bonded with Lily fast, heading over each morning with a bounce in her step, inventing games like hide and seek with the plush toys, reading adventure stories, watching cartoons on a beat-up tablet. Lily confided in her one afternoon, her voice small but steady. I don't like Zoe. She's mean, makes me call her mom. I put up with her for Dad, he asks me to. But he doesn't see she doesn't love him, just pretends. When he's home, she's all nice to me, fussing over him like a perfect wife. When he's gone, she's cold, yells at me, says I'm in her way. I miss my real mom. She was the kindest, called me her doll, braided my hair, said I was her joy. Dad was happier then, always smiling, not like now. Emily was stunned but kept her tone light, probing gently. Have you told your dad Zoe's mean to you? Maybe he doesn't know. He loves you so much, I can tell. Lily sighed, picking at her quilt. I used to. He'd frown, think I'm jealous, tell me to listen to her. Then when he leaves, she gets madder, calls me a tattletale, says I'm trying to ruin things. So I stopped. He wouldn't believe me anyway. Tough spot, huh? Emily said, squeezing her hand. Well, we're pals now. You can tell me anything. It's easier together, right? Lily brightened, nodding eagerly. She lit up for Emily's visits, sulking when she left. Emily noticed Victor and Zoe's marriage was fraying too. Marta confirmed it over a hushed chat in the kitchen. Zoe lived for herself, acting like a queen while Victor slaved away at work, barking orders at staff, his shoulders perpetually slumped. The help sighed in relief when Madam, as Marta dubbed her, breezed out for massages, shopping sprees, or cocktails with her gaggle of friends. Though Emily stayed polite and diligent, Zoe seethed with jealousy. A normal stepmom might have been glad Lily had someone caring for her, but not Zoe. She hated Emily's cheerfulness, the way Lily blossomed under her care. It gnawed at her like a splinter. When Victor got home, she'd corner him, her voice shrill. "Fire the nanny! Tomorrow! Tell her not to come back. She's trouble." "Why?" Victor asked, rubbing his temples, genuinely baffled. "Lily adores her. She's kind, hard-working, rare to find someone so positive. She lifts my mood, honestly." That sent Zoe into a tailspin. She suspected Victor's recent lightness meant danger. Emily, plain as she was in her faded cardigans, might steal her spot. Lily clung to Emily, sobbing when she left, brushing off Zoe's half-hearted attempts at affection. Every time Victor praised Emily, his warm glances lingering a beat too long, Zoe's stomach twisted. She nitpicked Emily's every move, hovering over meals, snapping about crumbs, desperate to sabotage her and crow to Victor about some invented failure. After the school ordeal, Emily had learned to cover her bases. She started recording anything Zoe might twist against her or Lily, snippets of conversations, timestamps on photos, building a shield of proof against false claims. Before Emily came along, Zoe had neglected Lily's growth entirely. No preschool to spark her curiosity, no walks to stretch her legs, no playmates to giggle with, though Lily ached for friends her age. Zoe didn't care. Lily was an afterthought, a shadow in her self-absorbed world. But once Emily stepped in, things shifted. As Lily grew stronger, eating hearty meals of oatmeal with honey or grilled cheese she'd nibble with a shy smile, she joined Emily on outings to a nearby park. The air there smelled of damp grass and pine, and the playground buzzed with kids. Lily took to the swings first, her skinny legs pumping as Emily pushed gently from behind, then ventured to the sandbox, her small hands patting lumpy castles into shape. She made a friend, a gap-toothed girl with pigtails, then another, a boy with a soccer ball who challenged her to a race. She'd come home flushed and chatty, devouring dinner with an appetite Victor hadn't seen in years. He noticed her rosy cheeks, the way she'd ramble about feeding breadcrumbs to pigeons with Emily, her eyes bright with stories. Zoe despised every second of it. She'd spent months convincing Victor his daughter was frail and lazy, a convenient excuse to dodge time with her and indulge in her own pleasures. Hours at salons getting her nails painted crimson, shopping for dresses she'd wear once, spa days that left her smelling of lavender and entitlement. Motherly instincts? Non-existent. To Zoe, Lily was a burden she'd never signed up for. "Why bother?" she'd mutter to herself, sipping wine in the bathtub. "She'll grow up eventually and won't even thank me." She'd justified her neglect by claiming Lily was too lazy to dress herself or walk far. Then, after one outing where Lily caught a cold, Zoe had her golden ticket. "She's delicate, might catch something worse. Better keep her inside," she'd told Victor, her voice dripping with fake concern. Emily's park trips flipped that narrative on its head, exposing Zoe's game for what it was. On those walks, Emily sometimes bumped into Steve after his shift. He'd limp over from the school, his janitor's uniform swapped for a faded hoodie, and they'd catch up near the benches, drawn to each other's easy company. Lily, missing her dad's constant business trips, adored Steve's gentle lessons, how to balance on a bike, wobbling at first, or kick a soccer ball without tripping over her own feet. One breezy afternoon, Zoe tailed them, lurking behind a row of oaks with her phone out. She snapped photos as Steve joined in, laughing with Emily while Lily pedaled in circles. That night, she stormed into the living room, shoving the screen in Victor's face, her voice shrill with fury. "Look at this, honey. This nanny's no good. Fire her now. She's flirting with some limping creep instead of watching Lily. What kind of example is that for a kid?" If she'd known the fallout, she'd have kept her mouth shut. Victor's eyes narrowed as he studied the photo, recognition dawning. "Quiet," he snapped, cutting off her tirade. "That's him. I'm sure of it. I've been trying to track him down for years. I need to ask Emily about this." Zoe glared, her perfectly arched brows knitting in confusion. "Who? What's there to ask? Kick her out. Are you even listening? She's wormed her way in. Next, she'll be replacing me in bed." "Stop talking nonsense," Victor shot back, his patience fraying. "I'll handle it. Go to bed. Let me think. Instead of stalking her, why don't you take Lily out yourself for once? Furious, Zoe stormed off, her robe swishing behind her, another plan foiled. Her hatred for Emily burned hotter, and she vowed to ruin her no matter what it took. Victor sank into his armchair, the memory flooding back. 2 years ago, he'd been in a car with a reckless, drunk friend, tearing through an intersection on a red light. A taxi barreled from a side street, headlights blinding, aimed straight for his door. The cab driver, Steve, swerved at the last second, crashing into a tree with a sickening crunch to avoid them. Victor and his buddy stumbled out, finding Steve slumped in the wreckage, pale and trembling, his leg a mangled mess. The friends slurred a promise to help, but Victor, rattled and ashamed, never followed up. "Here's my chance to fix that," he decided, rubbing his jaw. "That guy saved my life. I could have died in that wreck. Did my friend ever help him? And how does Emily know him?" He called Emily in the next morning, showing her the photo Zoe had snapped. "Who's this man? Why is he with you and Lily? Boyfriend? Husband?" Startled but steady, Emily met his gaze. "No, just a friend. Steve, the school janitor. He's had it rough. Needs leg surgery. Can't afford it. We chat sometimes. He taught Lily to bike." "Why? Where'd you get this? Are you spying on me? That's creepy. If you don't trust me, I'll quit right now." "But you're blind, Victor. Yes, blind. You say you love Lily, but where's your time for her? Toys and money don't cut it. She's not sick, she's lonely. Her mom's gone, you're always busy. When do you last spend a real day with her? Not 5 minutes, but hours. I could say plenty about your wife too, but I'll bite my tongue. So, am I fired?" Victor was floored, not offended, but jolted awake. "You're right," he stammered, running a hand through his hair. "I've been too busy. Trips, meetings, emergencies. I tell myself it's for them, so they're set. But who am I kidding? I can't remember my last day off. That's it. Tomorrow, we're all going to the park. Promise you'll introduce me to Steve. I owe him my life and want to help. Firing you? No way. I see how Lily's changed, her eyes shining, laughing, putting on weight. Thank you, Emily." Lily beamed at the park plan, bouncing on her toes, maybe her best day ever. Zoe sulked, grumbling about wasting a day on that kid, and fought Emily joining them, but Victor put his foot down. At the park, Zoe felt sidelined as Lily babbled to her dad, sticking close to him and Emily, who tied her shoelaces and wiped mustard off her chin like a mom. No one noticed Zoe brooding by the picnic table. When Steve limped over, Zoe was speechless. Emily greeted him warmly, Lily tugged Victor forward to meet Uncle Steve, and the men stepped aside for a long talk. Zoe fumed, tapping her foot. "What's taking him? Let's go. My head hurts." Lily piped up, her voice bright. "Go home and rest, Zoe. We'll keep playing. Emily, help me on the rope course. I'm scared to do it alone." Emily agreed, thrilled she'd reached Victor. She'd also had a guard install a discreet camera in Lily's room while they were out, a safeguard against Zoe's schemes, proof of her behaviour when Victor was away. With Zoe gone, everyone relaxed. Park games morphed into lunch at a diner, then a movie with popcorn. Victor and Steve hit it off, and Victor vowed to fund Steve's surgery, brushing off protests. "You saved me, Steve. I owe you. No young guy should suffer like that." Victor kept his word, found a clinic, a top surgeon, and covered every dime. Steve went in for surgery, grinning through the nerves. Victor left on another trip, trusting Emily with Lily but questioning his marriage to Zoe. Her initial allure, youth, beauty, that bold confidence, felt hollow now. What good was a gorgeous wife who griped non-stop, demanded cash for her whims, and offered nothing but shallow chatter? He grew fonder of Emily. She wasn't stunning, short, curvy, with a wardrobe of thrift store finds, but she made him feel at ease, like slipping into a favourite jacket. Her way with Lily was pure magic. He mulled it over on late flights, torn about confessing his feelings. Back from his trip, Zoe faked missing him, her voice syrupy, but it rang false. She whined about Emily again. "This can't go on. Since that nanny showed up, Lily's impossible, rude, disobedient." She stopped her pills. Doctor ordered. and lets her eat ice cream and junk. Do something. Victor, fed up, said he'd handle it and crashed, too tired to argue. The next morning, while Zoe slept in, the guard slipped him the camera footage. Early morning, pre-Emily, Zoe shoving Lily out of bed. Up, wash and eat. Do I need to beg you every day? Lily rubbing her eyes. Okay, can I wait for Emily? She's braiding my hair. I got the bands ready. I'm getting up. Don't yell. Zoe exploded. Obsessed with that nanny. She's spoiled you rotten. You're too big for this nonsense. Go wash. You're such a pain. Whining every damn day. I'm not here to pamper you. It happened daily without Emily there. Another clip showed Lily racing to Emily, joyful, as they did puzzles and read. Emily patient, loving, tucking a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. Victor knew what to do. He sent Emily and Lily out for ice cream, then stormed to Zoe, still lounging in bed at noon scrolling her phone. He yanked off her blanket. Get up, pack, and leave. We're done. I know how you treated Lily when I'm gone. You snake! I couldn't figure out why she was sick. She just wanted attention. Why marry me if you hate my kid? Zoe flailed, pleading, her voice shrill. What? I love you and Lily. The nanny's twisting this. She's the snake, ruining us. Don't trust her. Fire her. Victor shoved the tablet in her face, the video rolling. Checkmate. She packed, cursing Emily, blaming her for everything as she stuffed designer bags with clothes. Lily breathed easier, no more bullying. She and Emily grew closer. One evening, Lily slipped and called her mom, soft and natural, straight from the heart. Emily's breath hitched, and she hugged her tight. Oh, sweetie, you don't know how much that means to me. She rarely thought of Nathan now, her heart quietly turning to Victor. It scared her. Wrong, she told herself, to feel this for her boss. She fought it, avoiding his eyes, keeping her distance. Alone at night, though, she dreamed of his arms around her, her happiest fantasy. When Victor looked at her, she blushed, her cheeks flaming. He struggled too, drawn to her like a magnet, warmed by her presence, dimmed when she left. He wanted to confess but feared her reaction, her fresh divorce, her bond with Steve. They visited Steve together. He was recovering fast, hobbling on crutches but grinning, soon to be discharged. Over hospital coffee, he dropped a bombshell. I'm in love, with Inna, a nurse here. She's got a 9-year-old daughter. We're moving in together. She's amazing, kind, caring, laughs at my dumb jokes. Emily laughed, teasing. Steve, you move fast. Not afraid to get burned again? Steve shrugged, sipping his coffee. Life's short. Follow your heart. What about you two? Even Lily knows you're in love. She's waiting for the wedding. Emily flushed, stammering. Victor seized the moment, his voice steady but soft. You're wiser than me, Steve. I've been an idiot. Emily, I love you, have for a while. Be my wife. We're already a family, say yes. Stunned but elated, Emily's breath caught, tears brimming, her heart racing. Victor, this blindsided me, but I'm thrilled. I love you too. Yes, I'll marry you. I'm so happy. Steve chuckled, raising his cup. There we go. I'm your witness. Victor helped Emily reclaim her apartment, knowing it mattered to her. He hired a top lawyer who dug up proof her mum had funded most of it, selling a cabin and land years back. A new trial ordered the 3-bedroom sold, proceeds split evenly. Victor forced Nathan and Irene out, their smug faces falling as movers hauled their stuff to the curb. With Emily's share, they bought Steve a modest place, a 2-bedroom with a yard. He was over the moon, ready to build a life with Inna. Victor also gave him a driver job at his company, reliable, steady work for a reliable guy. Nathan's life crumbled. His half barely bought a fixer-upper 1-bedroom, its roof leaking, walls stained. Irene, lazy and needy, bailed after the downgrade, whining to her dad, Daddy, I goofed. Nathan's a jerk. Her father fired him, leaving Nathan broke and bitter, scrambling for odd jobs. Even his mum scolded him over the phone. You reap what you sow, humiliated Emily. Now it's you. She's thriving with her new husband and his girl. I saw her downtown, slim, glowing, happy. You drove off a woman who loved you. Figure it out, Nathan. Weak-willed, he never apologized or rebuilt, just drank, sinking lower, blaming everyone but himself. Zoe vanished from town. Victor was glad, wanting no trace of her tainting their fresh start. Steve's and Victor's families grew tight. Lily and Inna's daughter became pals, trading dolls and secrets, celebrating holidays together. Emily let go of her fertility struggles, pouring her heart into Lily, feeling fully a mom. Victor adored her for it. Brushing Lily's long hair one night, she'd smile. "My little mermaid. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were mine. Wanted to hug you tight. Thank you, sunshine, for opening your heart. I love you more than anything." Lily hugged back, whispering, "I love you too, Mommy." Her small arms squeezed tight, and Emily's world felt whole,